Hey, 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 my darklings. It is so good to be back. The house is finally quiet again. The winter sickness has passed. The boxes are mostly unpacked, and I've got my studio up and running. Well, it's mostly up and running, but it's close enough for us to step back into the dark together. I hope that you have missed me as much as I have missed you. This has gotten to be a very important part of my life, and we had to move from one location to another. We're finally up and running, and hopefully, this studio will work better than my last setup. So, before we begin, a quick note. Everything you hear in this episode is researched and pieced together from the best available sources. I do my absolute best to bring you accurate, thoughtful storytelling. But I am human, and mysteries like this one don't always come with clean answers. So think of this as our journey into the unknown together. Now, imagine a lake so high in the Himalayas that most people will never see it in their lifetime. A lake so remote, so icy, that for most of the year it's a frozen eye staring blankly up at the sky. But when the sun finally crests the ridge in summer and the snow melts, the water reveals a nightmare. Hundreds of skeletons appear along its shore, scattered across the rocks and submerged in the glacial blue. This is Roopkund Lake, better known as Skeleton Lake. For decades, we thought we had it figured out, a single tragedy, a freak storm. But recent science has blown this case wide open, revealing a mystery that spans continents and 1,000 years of silence. Tonight, we're stepping into the shadow of these frozen peaks to uncover the chilling, impossible story of the bones at the top of the world. If you're new here, my name is May, and I am the host of the Dark Folio, your 10-minute coffee break where we discover and discuss all kinds of things that go bump in the night, all kinds of creepy, crawly, and unusual things you may not have heard of, or we just dig in a little deeper. The world first officially learned of the horror in 1942. A British Indian forest ranger was trekking at 16,000 feet when he stumbled across the shore. He described it as a strange lake and skeletons everywhere. Now, remember the timing, 1942. World War II was raging. The British government's first fear wasn't an ancient mystery, it was an invasion. They terrified themselves with the idea that these were Japanese soldiers who had died of exposure while trying to sneak through the mountain passes. But the bones were old, way too old. Initial radiocarbon dating told a story of a single massive catastrophic event in the 9th century. But as our technology got better, the story it got weirder. The bones weren't all from the same time, and they certainly weren't all from the same place. So let's talk numbers. There are between 300 and 800 skeletons at Roopkund. Some are still remarkably preserved with bits of flesh and hair clinging to the bone because of the intense cold. For a long time, the hailstone theory was the gold standard. When scientists examined the skulls, they found short, deep cracks. These weren't the long fractures you get from a fall or from a sword. They were blunt force marks from something round and heavy hitting from directly above. The theory, around the year 800, a group of South Asian travelers, likely on a pilgrimage, was caught on the ridge with nowhere to hide. Suddenly, the sky turned black, and hailstones just shy of the size of baseballs began to rain down. With no shelter in the treeless wasteland, they were simply battered to death. But then in 2019, a massive genomic study changed everything. It turns out that was only half the story. But before we descend further into the mystery, my kindred spirits, if you're drawn to stories like these, strange, eerie, and just a little unsettling, make sure you're following the Dark Folio wherever you listen. If you have a moment, leave a rating or a review. It really does help other curious minds find their way to our little corner of the dark. And if you want to see photos from Skeleton Lake or some of the original notes from the 1942 discovery, well, I'm planning on uploading some over on Facebook. Just find the Facebook page, The Dark Folio. And now that I have my studio back up and running, we are going to hit it hard. So let's keep going, because what comes next, science doesn't quite have an answer for it. This is where the script of history goes off the rails. DNA sequencing revealed that while the first group was indeed South Asian, there was a second group that died at the lake nearly 1,000 years later, around the year 1800. And they weren't locals. The DNA of this second group matched people from the eastern Mediterranean, specifically the islands of Greece and Crete. Now think about that. 1,000 years after the first massacre, a group of people from the Mediterranean traveled halfway across the known world, climbed 16,000 feet into the most treacherous terrain on Earth, and died in the exact same spot as the first group. Why were they there? Well, there's no record of a Greek expedition to the Himalayas in the 1800s. They weren't related to the local population. They weren't part of any known trade route. They are ghosts in the genetic record. While science struggles to explain the Greeks, local folklore has its own answer. And I'm going to pre-warn you with my country accent. I hope I don't butcher this too much, so just bear with me. The lake sits on the path of the Nanda Devi Rajat pilgrimage. According to the legend, a medieval king named Jazdawal took his pregnant wife and a troupe of dancers on the trek. They treated the mountain with disrespect, singing, dancing, and bringing luxuries into a sacred space. And the goddess, Nanda Devi, enraged by their arrogance, hurled iron balls from the sky to strike them down. It's eerie, isn't it? Long before scientists found the blunt force trauma on the skulls, the locals were already telling stories about a goddess raining death from the clouds. But even the legend doesn't explain our 19th century Greek travelers. Were they following the same path? Did they stumble into a curse that they didn't believe in? So, stay with me, because we're about to look at the one theory science can't settle. So we have two groups, 1,000 years apart, one from India, one from the Mediterranean. Now, some researchers suggest the hailstorm only killed the first group. If that's true, how did the second group die? There are no signs of battle, no weapons were found, no signs of disease. The lake is a dead end. It's not on a path to anywhere else. You don't end up at Roopkund by accident. You have to want to be there. Did the Mediterranean group go there because they had heard of the Lake of Bones and they wanted to see it for themselves? And then did they succumb to altitude sickness? Or did the mountains simply decide that, like the king and queen of legend, they didn't belong? Every summer, the ice at Roopkund melts, the water clears, and for a few short weeks, the faces of the past look back up at us. We like to think that science solves mysteries, but Skeleton Lake proves that sometimes science only makes them deeper. It gave us DNA, it gave us dates, but it left us with a haunting image, a group of travelers from a sun-drenched Greek island taking their final breaths in the frozen Himalayan wasteland, surrounded by the bones of people who had died 10 centuries before them. Nature has a way of keeping its secrets, and the mountains, they have a very long memory. Thank you for joining me in the dark tonight. I'm May, and this has been the Dark Folio. Stay curious, and as always, stay a little dark.